Hi, everybody. Welcome to class this week. It's just going to do a little bit of a shorter class today. I'm just recording this just from my room in Hong Kong here. Just going to do it right before I head home back to Vancouver. So let's just start. The class today on Rob Preece's books will be one of the shorter chapters. We've done sort of the introduction, and we get into it just about creating sort of what they call a strong, strong, stable vessel for your practice. So let's just start with the Heart Sutra. We do, and then get into just a short set of prayers and meditation, like always. Okay, Great Mother. This is homage to the Great Mother, Prajnaparamita, Heart Sutra. Okay, so my phone here. Homage, profession, wisdom, the Blessed Mother. Thus I've heard at one time the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajgir in Mass Vulture's Mountain, to the assembly of monks and nuns and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. That time the Blessed One was absorbed in the concentration in countless aspects of phenomena called profound illumination. That time also Spiravalokshvara, the bodhisattva, the great being, was looking perfectly the profound profession of wisdom, looking perfectly also the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Then, through the power of Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Spiravalokshvara, the bodhisattva, the great being, how should a son of the lineage train who wishes to engage the profound profession of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and Spiravalokshvara, the bodhisattva, the great being, replied to Venerable Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of the lineage wishes to engage the profound profession of wisdom should look perfectly like this. Subsequently, looking perfectly and correctly, also the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is none other than form is none other than emptiness. Likewise, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, having no characteristics. They do not produce and do not cease. They have no defilement, no separation from defilement. They have no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, and no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mentality, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no tactile object, no phenomenon. There is no I element, so forth up to a mentality element, and also up to no element of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, no exhaustion of ignorance, and so forth, up to no aging and death, and no exhaustion of aging and death. Likewise, there is no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no exalted awareness, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide in the profession of wisdom. Their minds have no obstructions and no fear. Passing utterly beyond perversity, they attain the final nirvana. Also, all Buddhas reside perfectly in the three times, having relied upon the profession of wisdom, became manifest, complete Buddhas in a state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, unsurpassed mantra, the equal to the unequal mantra, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, since it's not false, should be known as the truth. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is proclaimed, Tayatam Gata Gata Paragata Parasamgati Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, bodhisattva, great being, should train the profound profession of wisdom like this. Then the Blessed One arose in that concentration and said to Spiravalokshvara, the bodhisattva, the great being, that he'd spoken well. Good son of the lineage, just like that. Since it's like that, just as you have revealed, in that way the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra, Spiravalokshvara, the bodhisattva, the great being, the entire circle of disciples of all the world beings, gods, humans, demigods, and spirits, were delighted and highly praised what had been spoken by the Blessed One. Now doing a few prayers here, just opening prayers. Ourselves surrounded by all sentient beings. And we can just visualize in the sky, beautiful sky above us, the synthesis or embodiment of the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and all holy beings and light beings, this being the higher form, Sambhogakaya form of Buddha Shakyamuni, conqueror Vajradhara. And he has a beautiful blue, sapphire blue body made out of light or energy. With a crown, his arms crossed at his chest here, holding a bell in his left hand and Vajra scepter, Dorje, in his right. And in lotus position with beautiful ornaments and so forth and jewelry. And again, for sentient beings, it's our mother on our left, our father on our right. People we love the most behind us as support, people we like the least in front of us as objects of our prayers and compassion. Think of all sentient beings here, all of us together making prayers to conquer Vajradhara. So people from all over the world, all beings in the natural environment, animal realm, Spirit world is here. Gods and demigods and goddesses and demi-goddesses and from celestial beings and hungry ghosts and hell beings, all of us together here. Taking refuge, we say, I and all sentient beings to achieve enlightenment go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I and all sentient beings to achieve enlightenment go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I and all sentient beings to achieve enlightenment go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So generating that refuge in our heart and the three jewels, knowing that we fear suffering and we have faith or confidence that the three jewels, like the Buddha being the doctor, the medicine being the Dharma, and the Sangha being the healthcare staff, like nurses and so forth, helping administer the medicine. This is the confidence we have is in the strength of the medicine to cure our suffering. And through the virtues we collect by giving the perfections, may we become a Buddha for the benefit of all. Through the virtues we collect by giving other perfections, may we become a Buddha for the benefit of all. Through the virtues we collect by giving other perfections, may we become a Buddha for the benefit of all. Now just setting our intention, bodhicitta, with the awakening mind. May everything we do be a cause for the awakening, enlightenment, and salvation from suffering of all sentient beings. May we become Buddha to lead all sentient beings to full Buddhahood. Okay. 7 limbs here. With my body, speech, and mind humbly I prostrate. Make offerings both set out and imagine. I confess my wrong deeds from all time and rejoice in the virtues of all. Please stay until samsara ceases and turn the wheel of Dharma for us. I dedicate all virtues to great enlightenment. And offering the mandala, purified universe here from our hearts, the ground sprinkled with perfume and spread with flowers, a great mountain, 4 lands, sun and moon, seen as a Buddha land, and offered thus, may all beings enjoy such pure lands. Om Idam Guru Radha Mandalakam Tiyami. Send forth this jewel mandala to you, precious gurus. And reciting the short Lamrim prayer from Je Tsongkhapa, prayer of the stages of the path. The path begins with strong reliance on my kind teacher, source of all good. Oh, blessed with this understanding to follow him with great devotion. This human life with all its freedoms, extremely rare with so much meaning. Oh, blessed with this understanding, all day night to seize its essence. My body, like a water bubble, decays and dies so very quickly. After death come the results of karma, just like the shadow of a body. With this firm knowledge and remembrance, bless me to be extremely cautious and always avoiding harmful actions and gathering abundant virtue. Samsara's pleasures are deceptive, give no contentment, only torment. So please bless me to strive sincerely to gain the bliss of perfect freedom. Oh, bless me so that from this pure thought comes mindfulness and greatest caution, to keep as my essential practice the doctrine's root, the Pratimoksha. Just like myself, all my kind mothers are drowning in samsara's ocean. Also that I may soon release them, bless me to train in bodhicitta. But I cannot become a Buddha by this alone without 3 ethics. Oh, bless me the strength to practice the Bodhisattva's ordination. By pacifying my distractions, analyzing perfect meanings, bless me to gain quickly the union of special insight and quiescence. When I become a pure container, through common class, bless me to enter the essence practice of good fortune, the supreme vehicle of Vajrayana. The 2 attainments both depend on my sacred vows and my commitments. Bless me to understand this clearly and keep them at the cost of my life. By constant practice in procession, the way explained by holy teachers, bless me to gain both the stages which are the essence of the Tantras. May those who guide me in the good path and all my companions all of long lives, please bless me to pacify completely all obstacles outer and inner. May I always find perfect teachers and take delight in holy Dharma, accomplish all grounds and pass swiftly and gain the state of Vajradhara. So with this we can feel that Buddha Vajradhara sort of shrinks in size. It's just like a little jewel, a little piece of lapis or sapphire, a little shooting star, a little comet coming down to the crown of our head, entering our crown chakra and then slowly descending to our heart, where he dissolves. All the wisdom, compassion, and power of all the Buddhas goes directly into our hearts. In particular, all the blessings, initiations, transmissions of Tantra go directly, sort of psychically, magically into us. And our experience and commitment to and realization of bodhicitta is even stronger. Okay. So with this strong energy of bodhicitta, let's take a look at the chapter here. So again, just sort of a shorter little discussion here. This sort of is in keeping with a lot of stuff that Rob Preece has talked on before, of course, being a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst like he is. This is sort of right up his alley about the idea of becoming a quote-unquote stable vessel for Vajrayana practice or Tantric practice. So he says to integrate Tantric processes, we need a solid and stable identity. In other words, just like if you want to make soup or have a pot of tea, you don't want that to be a broken or leaky pot. So by the same way, by analogy, we ourselves, our sense of self-identity, our soul or whatever has to be like a good teapot or a good pot. They always say with Lam Rim, the same thing, what kind of student are you? You don't want the dirty pot that contaminates, whatever. Like I say, you've got your pot full of kimchi, just give it a rinse out and then put nice chai tea in it when it tastes like kimchi chai tea. You don't want that. You don't want the broken pot where you just pour it goes all over the floor. You don't want the leaky pot, or you don't want the upside down pot. Like in other words, you're a person that never listens, never takes advice, never takes anything seriously. So you won't even hold anything. It's a similar thing here with Tantra. We need to be the right kind of vessel or pot to be able to receive these teachings. It says we need a grounded, healthy identity which remains stable as the process of transformation unfolds. This seems obvious, but many do these exotic practices from an unstable psychological basis. So, and there's different reasons for this, obviously. I mean, all of us, to varying degrees on a continuum, have our own issues, psychological, psychic, and emotional issues, and from which we are unstable, to varying degrees. And so this will have an effect on our tantric practice or our studies here. So he says that this is an older book, but he says many traditional Buddhist teachers, Taoist teachers, Hindu teachers from Eastern cultures, and even you could say basically non-Western teachers, he says, don't know how much emotional wounding of Western North American particular students have. They rather assume that we have well-established strong egos and therefore can abandon or surrender our egos and the self-cherishing egotism that we have. That's the cause of our sufferings. So, just maybe not as much anymore, but I think initially from what I always heard from when a lot of lamas first started to teach in the West, Tibetan Buddhist lamas, the 1970s and 80s, of course, they just know Western culture from Hollywood movies or TV, and they think everybody's rich and smart and educated and super grounded and have it all together. And so they could easily do, these practices or even higher practices and no problem. However, culturally, historically, just almost as a Western North American Judeo-Christian late capitalist historical position that we're in, sort of North Americans in particular, again, culturally, sociologically, historically, all these things, a lot of people have many, oftentimes quite severe emotional, psychological, psychic issues that a lot of let's say Buddhist teachers from Asian countries didn't know about because they're culturally specific. Obviously, a lot of them don't come from a Judeo-Christian culture. A lot of them might have come from Tibet, from more of a traditional culture. So they might not understand sort of a late capitalist, Western, liberal consumer society. And so it was sort of a bad fit in a lot of ways. Is people needed to do these kinds of practice, a very healthy, strong ego with a sense of self-worth. But then when people would get, be triggered or traumatized or have problems come up in their practice and become psychologically unstable or even worse, a lot of these teachers, traditional Buddhist teachers, let's say from Tibet or India or anything else, didn't know what to do for Western students or even how to help. And there was a big cultural problem, I guess. Even sort of the conceptual maps were different here, right? So it's Yeah, so that's one thing that Rob Preece was sort of mentioning. I think things have gotten better now, only because our Western culture, is spread around the world. I mean, this is the into the second decade of the 21st century now, and a lot of the people, let's say Tibetan Buddhist teachers, have grown up, even if they're not Western, they've sort of grown up knowing much more about Western culture. In a lot of words, have similar values and very similar to Western people now. So I don't think it's as much of a stretch, these kinds of things. And also, just people are a lot more familiar with these kinds of issues now. But even since I started over 30 years ago, I saw this. My teachers, as Rinpoche, used to say Lama Yeshe teaching in Western countries, United States, Australia, even Westerners, North Americans in India and Nepal. He'd always say, "Oh, you Western people are so complicated. Like your psychological, emotional, psychic lives are much more complex, not better, just different than, let's say, our sort of psychic topographies or our sort of psychic map, psychological map in traditional Tibetan culture." And so, you saw this famously in the 1990s. A person asked His Holiness Dalai Lama, "What do you do when you're suffering from," again, maybe brought up in more of a traditional Judeo-Christian context, particularly a lot of some Christian sects or whatever Christian backgrounds, they said, with so much guilt, in particular self-loathing. And so at the time, it might have been as long as it's translated to Jinpa, they couldn't even really translate that term self-loathing into, even like I said, the idea of guilt is a Semitic concept, a Abrahamic concept, coming from Judaism, Christian, Islam, that God is a judge, the angels are the jury, and then there's laws that you've been given, Talmudic laws, Christian biblical laws, Islamic laws, Sharia laws, and you will be judged. This whole ethical system is not in something like Hinduism and Buddhism. It's something different. When we talk about sort of the traditional stories, you get that when you go to hell and meet Yama, the Lord of Death, it's an analogy, of course, but anyway, like in Mongolia, they call him Erlik Khan, like Dharma Raja, and he's got, just like Kalaru's got the big buffalo head, this and that, and he's got like a little list. They say like black and white, like it's the old sort of curse board, where it almost looks like a checkerboard, sort of good and bad energy, white and black, and they have it, and it's just kind of like all your karma is listed on that. But what's interesting about that is that the other thing he's holding in his hand is a mirror. So your judgment is meted out by you for you, specifically based on your karma. He just shows you a reflection, and you sort of create your own hell. That's very different than, obviously, from a Western point of view, what we've been used to, the idea that you go to hell, and I go to, let's say, heaven or hell or whatever, and then you're judged for, again, breaking laws. These are laws that God has given, and then you're violating them, like the Ten Commandments and stuff. So anyway, this is the idea of guilt, very different than shame. Shame's something parallel to that, but even in more Asian cultures, in Buddhist cultures, the idea of shame is a virtuous mental factor that ends up helping you be ethical, because shame is the propriety you have of, how does this impact on others? Like, what would people think of me? Not just my own sense of self, but it's almost like my sense of personal honor, integrity, or self-worth. That's very different than the idea of guilt and shaming going together. And guilt in particular, as Martin Heidegger said, guilt on an existential level is guilt before yourself, that you've blown it, you're responsible for what you've done to yourself. And it's a similar thing. It's this guilt that, in Christian ideas, original sin, that you're born guilty, even as you come into this life. You're in this sort of flawed, meat sack here, meat machine, and, exiled from Eden and all these things, and God. And so there's this primordial guilt that you have to, hence you have to be redeemed, this and that. So anyway, the point is, this, you see how complicated these things are, and a lot of Westerns who were bringing this kind of quote unquote emotional baggage to their tantric practice and going into retreat, and just culturally, social, all these things, these lamas, and they're not trained. Even Buddhist psychology is very, very different when you study mind and mental factors, or even studying a lot of more the esoteric understanding of spirits, the different maras and obstacles in your mind. It's very, very different than Western psychotherapy, whether it be Freudianism, going into family relations theory, Melanie Klein, Doug Winnicott. I mean, they don't have any of that, right? I mean, maybe they do now, of course, and people, a lot of Buddhist people, teachers from Asia even get Western educations and do therapy, no healing work now. And there's all these things. I'm just saying initially. And so a lot of people would be coming with these kinds of issues, and people, Buddhist teachers, didn't even know what was wrong with them, or why they were suffering, where the suffering was coming from, nor did know how to help them. If you say, oh, I believe that I'm irredeemable and unsavable, and just I'm filled with absolute guilt and self-loathing, I want to die and destroy myself, some of these lamas will be like, man, I don't know what, where's that? Like, what's that mean? You don't understand it. So that's a huge issue. And I know this, when I started, there was still a lot of this still with some of our old lamas that were very old, grew up in Tibet, and just didn't, when you'd ask these kinds of questions, Rinpoche, hello, I have a huge problem. I hate my parents. And I'm like, you hate your parents? Why did they? All parents are like, all sentient beings are your mothers. They love you. They brought you into this world, giving you a human body. How can you hate your mom and stuff? Like, you can see it's a bit of a joke, but we can talk about this being an issue, like a proper problem with sort of a fit, so to speak, cultural fit here. But it's also compounded, Rob Preece says, by a big Western misconceptions that Buddhism is a negation of the ego. This idea that, and this is right back to sort of 1950s beat Zen, where the idea is sort of embrace nothingness. There's, I'm making my mind blank. When I meditate, I just make my mind like a state of non-being, non-attachment, no ego, these kinds of things. And of course, as just like the classes I've done on emptiness, for instance, especially in the Gelugpa tradition here, that is a completely nihilistic understanding of what selflessness really means. You have to understand how the true truths of conventional and ultimate reality work, obviously. But a lot of students, newer Western students, they never got any of this. They haven't. And so they have a very sort of vulgar understanding of what emptiness or selflessness means, and they get a wrong conclusion from it, a nihilistic conclusion. So emptiness is to cut through the view that holds that the ego is solid, self-existent entity, right? Sort of an ultimate truth to the ego, that your sense of self is always already permanent, unchanging, not produced by your mind, these kinds of things. Whereas that's what we're looking to do. But of course, we maintain a relative self, the self that suffers, self that gets enlightened, the self that's meditating, right? So if we negate the relative self, we're in the danger of becoming nihilistic. So to function in the world, Rob Preece says, we need a stable ego and the focus of awareness, both in our inner and outer world. And he says, even realized people or Buddhas use the I pronoun. And this I is relative truth. So of course, this is what we talk about the nominal I, or nominal ego. Okay? So if we get rid of this, and let's say some people with a wrong understanding of emptiness do, where there's no I at all, meditating Tantra is just about blotting out the I, like everything is one, there's no me, there's no you, there's nothing, right? This can lead to sort of a severe psychological problems, and even sort of can tip into a form of psychosis, okay? Where Rob Preece particulars in this case is where your normal self is flooded by all this unconscious material from your unconscious, right? You get triggered and traumatized and all these kinds of things. So two dimensions of the ego, he says, and oftentimes are not differentiated in people, especially in Western things, is the idea that there is a healthy ego and then an emotionally wounded ego. So our healthy ego, the one that allows us to function with other people in the world and have a job or whatever, or have relationships with other people, have a spiritual practice, this and that, this is always being made complicated, problematic, and so forth with the second part of us, which is sort of the wounded and unconscious parts of ourselves. So this, the second part, the emotionally wounded part of ourself, is the ego that's damaged by, for instance, childhood trauma or traumatic things, deep sufferings that have happened to us throughout our life. And that this ego identity is overwhelmed by layer and layer of emotional held beliefs about this I or me that suffered. So these are the painful wounds we cling on to, that we feel are absolutely real, solid, and unchanging. where we're fearful for our own safety in regards to these wounds. And they can make us feel like we're bad people, worthless people, stained, guilty people, shameful people, dirty people, unlovable people, this kind of thing. So we claim to this traumatized self or I as some absolute permanent I, and we can even get emotional feelings from this I. Like, we can even sometimes even enjoy all the problems and suffering and dramas that come out of this sort of wounded I, right? So what Rob Preece says is that this is the emotional tone of our ego grasping. Okay? So so what needs to be removed isn't our regular everyday ego, but this kind of clinging and confusion and suffering around our traumas. That's what has to be healed or let go of. Even sort of the more sort of perverse parts of ourselves that take enjoyment or have sort of the self-narcissistic cherishing of our sufferings and the ego we get or self-identity we get from our dramas and from our sufferings and from our trauma, right? And he says, of course, a lot of this ego damage comes from our childhood or for our upbringing, for dysfunctional relationships or situations we've had in our life, which karmically, in terms of past and future lives, we're responsible for, but in terms of this life, weren't our fault. We could be victims of violence or abuse, economic factors, wars, political instability, all these things that damage us and traumatize us and make it very hard for us to have sort of a healthy, happy ego, right? So a spiritual practice that negates the ego is not the answer to these kinds of issues. Um, uh, so especially in terms of for people who have sort of failed to have a proper ego form in their childhood because of abuse or neglect or abandonment, or they had sort of no solid self in the first place, again, according to let's say, the traumas they've gone through. So these are just the issues that we have to address before we get um, uh, into Vajrayana. Now, the thing is, as you know, we don't know this. Like, if the idea that you had to be, he says we need psychotherapy in the first place to prepare the ground to practice Tantra. Well, we're never going to get better. Like, part of the thing with samsara, the only way to actually solve all of our psychological, emotional, psychic, and physical sufferings is to reach nirvana. And so there's no end to these kinds of problems in our lives if we are the kinds of sentient beings that have all these sufferings. Like, we have a healthy side of us and then an unhealthy, sick side of us because of all of our traumas and problems from our childhood, abuse and so forth, mental health issues, anxiety, substance abuse issues in our family or even in ourselves. But so it's not like we have to get all those sorted out and healed and perfectly cured before we start practicing Tantra. That's impossible. But at the same time, we kind of have to deal with those and have those as as an issue or a project while we practice Tantra. So we need we need to do that work to be on that journey, or otherwise we have what they call spiritual bypassing, which you're using your spiritual journey, your sort of alchemical journey, so to speak, the whole spiritual psychological journey, the hero heroine, or sort of Joseph Conrad's journey to become a hero or heroine or whatever. We use that as a form of spiritual bypassing, as an excuse not to do that deeper psychological, psychic, and emotional work. Why? Or healing work. Why? Because it's too painful. That's the real work, is self-overcoming on that level of really doing the deep healing work and becoming whole. But because it's so much work and you have to confront all of your sufferings that you went through, most people, it's just much easier, like I say, to engage in Star Wars Buddhism and pretend all that stuff will get sorted out by someone else or yourself later in another life. Or somehow, again, you'll be able to bypass or kind of leapfrog over it and you'll never have to deal with it. But anyone who's done Tantra a lot, just by doing mantras, practice, visualizations, doing sadhanas and pujas, all of this stuff gets brought up and purified. You have to confront it. There is no easy way, queue jumping, secret code to get around this stuff. You have to deal with it sooner rather than later. You can't bypass it because there's no bypass, unfortunately. You have to get in line with everybody else. And so it oftentimes people go into Vajrayana because they want healing, because they're in so much suffering. A lot of people, one of my friends said, you know, it was her inside joke that of all the Buddhist communities, Vajrayana traditions, Tibetan Buddhism, let's say Shingon, that's the SPCA or the animal rescue uh, part of, so to speak, of all sort of damaged human beings. They're like, in other words, the toughest psychological and emotional cases all end up like marbles rolling down an incline into the tantric systems, right? And it's because a lot of times people with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, this and that, go into Vajrayana because they want to be healed. They want the cure. They want that powerful medicine to help them because they're suffering so much, right? And they're attracted to that big energy. Sometimes they can even be energy junkies for this. Um, so we have to have that. We're all addicts, just like William Burroughs says. We're all addicted to samsara. We're all running away from our pain. That's what samsara is. Just like Lama Yeshe's Tantra book, we all have this addicted mind when it comes to pleasure and bliss and happiness. So we're all mentally ill. As sentient beings, by definition, samsara, we're all literally, our mind is full of delusions and obstacles and so forth, and we're suffering because of them. Um, so we have to see this. We have to address our issues to become a stable ground or foundation for our practice. Otherwise, things go unconscious. You have two things where, just like Jacques Lacan would say, the jouissance is that we end up even in and through our practice getting off on our problems, on our we either spiritually bypass, we get off on our problems in the sense that the dramas of our personal issues and traumas get fitted right into the practice and we enjoy them in and through our practice. So rather than letting them go, overcoming, our grasping and clinging gets stronger as they become a substitute form of enjoyment. Or you just become an absolute psychotic personality where all your issues are unconscious. So you're just acting out. You know, Matthew Richards, great Lama, His Holiness Matthew Richards, but I have these huge unconscious personal issues that everyone else can notice, my students or people in public, and then everyone's trying to cover them up or struggle with them and they don't make sense or whatever. You know, Matthew, wow, he's this great teacher, but let's say he's like a huge drug addict or has all these huge anger issues or traumas or something. And then it's the kind of thing that I have a shadow that I'm not working on. So the question is that we all have to set the example for ourselves and others that we make these kinds of unconscious and personal issues part of the healing process, part of our practice to heal them and overcome them, and not again just let them run wild, right? And you also, I remember David Gonzalez, my dear friend and teacher, told us that His Holiness the Dalai Lama was complaining years ago, maybe 20 years ago or more, about certain Western students that were doing Tantra, but without a real proper understanding of emptiness to deal with their issues. So they were becoming basically at least sociopathic or at worst psychopathic in the sense that they were just taking on a tantric identity, but leaving their traumatized worldly ego there. So it's not like everything is empty, I'm Green Tara, in Pure Land Vila Code, everyone else is Green Tara, but rather Matthew Richards, I'm Green Tara. I'm Matthew, go to work, but I'm Green Tara. Like kind of like secretly I'm Spider-Man. You know, hi, I'm Green Tara. You know, but nothing's changed. I'm still the same crappy person, but I see myself as this green lady. You know, and you're so lucky to know me because I'm Green Tara. And it's always just like, no, it doesn't work that way. So it's the person's becoming worse, like their ego's being amplified in sort of like a psychotic way that's having real gross personal implications and sufferings for yourself and everybody around you there. So Rob Preece says, Tantra requires a well-formed, stable sense of self to ground the experiences. When the forces of psyches are released, if they're not grounded, we become disorientated, unable to maintain normal functional life, and this could disrupt our normal self-identity, and we can get close to psychotic break or deep psychological, emotional, and personal issues here. So he says, we need a lightning rod to ground the lightning. All this sort of energies, even stuff that's released, like traumas and things that end up getting sort of shaken and activated within our subtle body through our tantric practice, we need to be properly grounded for all this to come out like a lightning rod rather than having it a way that damages us and everyone around us. And it says, otherwise, we can't survive in a world. In other words, have a job, family commitments, and so forth, where we become disconnected from reality. So the danger here is in idealistic, fanciful notions of spirituality or a wounded self-identity. We need a balanced lifestyle to be maintained and a healthy, practical basis to be able to have to keep our life, I don't want to say normal, but sort of on a secure footing here. So we have to be able to integrate things, because otherwise, if we become dissociated, we can actually have real bodhicitta and help people. You end up just being in this sort of fantasy space. This is the idea of seeing that Tantra, the proper use of imagination through generation stage or Karen, is not fantasy. It's not about creating a world to escape a real world. It's basically seeing the dreamlike illusory nature of the world and replacing sort of a samsaric projected false dualistic world with one that's a non-dual pure world, right? That's very, very different than a fantasy space that you're projecting on as a way of getting past or sort of getting around or ignoring your issues or satisfying your issues in and through those fantasies. This is something completely different that way. So we have to be able to integrate. And that's what my lamas as a Rinpoche has always sort of encouraged us, is rather to sort of be these yogis or yoginis. We have nothing to do with people and just sort of like fall down a well of our own sort of isolation and disconnection. He's always encouraged everybody to get a job, get married, have a house, like be a quote unquote normal person. That all these experiences, tantric experiences we have, get properly integrated, that we can help and heal ourselves, but also deploy our bodhicitta, be able to help other people. If we're completely disoriented, disconnected, and even psychotic, how can our bodhicitta be of use to ourselves or anyone else? How can we help people that come to us for help? You know, our love and compassion has to go somewhere to sentient beings. We have to be able to build a bridge to reach them. And if we're completely dissociated, we can't do that. We can't even help ourselves. How could we get enlightened and help other people? So that one Western teacher, one of Trungpa students, Reggie Ray, he wrote a book on this, the importance of having proper grounded techniques. Because one of my dear friends and Buddhist teacher, Cedar Saucedas, he said he felt Western, a lot of now in the 21st century, people, because of the way the world is and basic almost societal breakdown, people have so many anxiety issues, psychological issues, emotional problems, traumas, substance abuse. They can't meditate. Like they can't do practice. They're too emotionally messed up. They get triggered. They can't be in the present moment. They can't feel their feelings because they're so traumatized. So it's like they need to have a proper embodied experience, a proper vessel. So the point was, he was saying, just to teach people the basics of mindfulness, meditation, and so forth, to get into their bodies, because it's like soul loss. Their mind's been like soul has been displaced from their body because of their traumas, right? They can't feel their feelings because they're overwhelmed and overloaded. They have no psychic space left to actually process things. So I've always felt, Rinpoche said this, and other lamas I know, like it's so good to have, be social, maintain the sort of sanity of having an amazing saying, good dharma friends, but also just normal friends who have known you longer, your friends and family that know if you're getting too removed, detached, weird, or whatever through your tantric practice, that you're getting ungrounded or getting superstitious or your mind's not so good. They can see that in you because they've known you long enough. And do things like have a proper qigong or yoga practice, anything that's working with the breath to sort of ground your prana, or even just exercise, going to the gym, jogging, playing some sports, hiking, going for long walks. And I've always felt, in addition to that, what Geshe Michael Roach had always said, that's great advice, is that you help out at the Sangha or your local church. Like you help uh, sort of preserve the container and spread the light of helping the sort of vehicles of the Dharma. um, in this world, like helping out at a temple or religious community, and that you do some kind of aid work or service work in your community for other people. This keeps you grounded. If you do charity work or volunteer work, you're engaging with others, sort of deploying your bodhicitta, being ethical, caring for others, and at the same time being with quote unquote normal people. It's bringing your tantric practice down to this world. So you're not in the Star Wars, Lord of the Rings fantasy. You're just in regular everyday situations helping people. So again, doing things like exercising, some kind of prana practice like qigong, meditations, even swimming or yoga, helping your religious community, doing some kind of service or volunteer work, and taking care of friends and family. I think that that's great, and this can just make you a very grounded, integrated kind of person. So you can sort of succeed as best you can in your worldly life, and all the results of your tantric practice, the teething of like the gears go together here. They're all integrated properly, and organically you can grow your tantric practice organically rather than have it be all sort of, spiritual bypassing and a fantasy, which will end the big thing, not heal you and just make you worse over the long run. Okay, so there we go. That's just, I really recommend. Rob Preece has written a lot about this. He was one of the first Tibetan Buddhist teachers, or even Buddhist teachers, really, I know, that wrote a lot about this. And like I said, that one book by, oh, I just mentioned him. It's called Touching Enlightenment, just sort of bringing enlightenment back into the body. Trimpa student there. I don't know why I can't remember. Anyway, he that's a really good book to read as well. Just being able to do real sort of good breath work and get into the body as a way, like we also in Western civilization, because of our Judeo-Christian background, which is very dualistic between your soul and your mind body, and our Cartesian heritage, the 1600s, where we have this sort of scientific, very intellectual, abstract, conceptual mind separate from the meat machine of our body. Our mind and bodies, our soul and bodies are oftentimes very, very split. Tantra is all about bringing the mind and the body into one through prana, through your breath. So we have to work on bridging these two through our practice to make, again, sure that the prana or the energy is sort of integrated and sort of ends up being purified, heightened, increased, but in a very moderate, measured, and organic way. It's Reggie Ray's the guy's name. So if you want to look at that one book, I read it years ago. It's quite good. Okay, so with that, there you go. So thanks for tuning in and getting this teaching, and we'll see you next time. We'll just take a moment again to dedicate this. Blessings of all holy beings, truth of karma, power of pure spring intention, bodhicitta, and all of our dharma wishes be fulfilled. Okay, thank you, and see you next time.